Hello and welcome to my review of Battlestar Galactica Book 1, originally released in 1978 as a tie-in to the TV movie. The book series would actually run on to 14 books, most written by Robert Thurston or Ron Goulart. This edition was repackaged in 1988, sans the photograph of the original release, but it is otherwise the same. While Thurston is credited here alongside the series producer Glen A Larson, I'm going to assume that Thurston did much of the heavy lifting here because he's a sci-fi author in his own right, while Larson's credits are mostly limited to co-author credits of novelizations of his considerable TV work. In keeping with that, the plot here mostly follows the original TV movie, including the death of Boltar, which was cut from the show when it was turned into a TV series in order that he could serve as the antagonist. In a galaxy far, far away, there are 12 colonies of humans that have been at war with their neighbours, the Cylons, for 1,000 years. Out of the blue, the Cylons offer peace, but only apparently if the humans take all their warships away from their homes to a remote rendezvous. Shockingly, this is a trap, and this is discovered by two pilots from the Battlestar Galactica, Zack and Apollo, who are brothers. Zack is the younger, and here we see a minor deviation from the TV show in that Zack, though less experienced, is not on his first mission, and nor does he contrive his position on the patrol as shown on TV. Instead, there's the implication that his superiors are punishing him for an indiscretion on board ship. Ty's teaching me a lesson for that little rest and recuperation escapade with Pei's chief nurse in sickbay. When Apollo has to deny Zack's accusation that he is on the mission just to babysit his younger brother, Zack says, "You sure, big brother?" And we get a deeper insight into their difficult relationship. Apollo hated the sarcastic emphasis on the word big. Sometimes his kid brother could be a royal pain in the blast-off tubes. "Don't be silly, Zack. You've got a fine battle record, not to mention the tiresome old datum that you came through with the highest marks in the history of the Academy." And if this exchange is a little too wordy for a cockpit chit-chat on mission, it's definitely too long for this scene, because this whole opening section was tightened up considerably for TV, and it gets to its payoff quicker and probably more effective. I assume that Thurston was working from an earlier script here rather than embellishing, because there are one or two similar deviations and additions as the story progresses. This one is not particularly badly written, and I appreciate the opportunity to learn more about the characters, but overall I'm not sure it's a change for the better. I think Zack works well the more naivety and innocence he has, and his expanded backstory here as an experienced pilot with something of an over-eager streak and a determination to prove himself greater than his elder brother. It all adds to the character, but it reduces the pathos of what happens next. Apollo and Zack discover the ambush, but Zack is killed as the two race back to warn the fleet. However, the Galactica, captained by Apollo's father Adama, is the only one of the human ships to launch any fighters. The fleet, ambushed and otherwise undefended, is being slowly wiped out, and Adama discovers that even worse is happening, that the Cylon warships are attacking their home planets at the same time. Although he has the only functioning warship, he leaves the battle and races home. He is, of course, too late. Those dastardly Cylons have just about wiped out the 12 worlds. Adama arranges for the survivors to gather in what ships they can and proposes that the fleet, amusingly referred to as a ragtag fleet every single time it is mentioned, whether by humans or Cylon characters or the narrator, well, Adama proposes they head off in search of Earth, which is a mythical planet from which all of the colonists originally spawned. Naturally, the Cylons keep looking for them without success due to their cloaking field, which was just one of a number of ideas dropped for the TV show. When Adama orders the Galactica to leave the opening battle, his orders are questioned by his subordinates. This is here and elsewhere, a task usually performed by Athena, and it does become just a little bit grating. Again, at the start, it just needs cutting for pace. But it is here, in the heat of the battle, that the idea that the human colonies have all these hidden refueling stations throughout the galaxies, and we're reminded of them again by this line when Thurston describes the pilots returning. Fortunately, the fueling stations, which were hidden from Cylon view by camouflaging force fields, were all intact, and the squadron was able to refuel. The idea of the cloaking field comes up again as the refugee fleet forms. They came to our designated assembling point, around which Apollo had neatly improvised an enveloping camouflage force field that made us invisible to the many Cylon search patrols that passed near us. How no ship led the Cylons directly to us is simply another facet of the historical miracle that took place. Even overlooking the fact that both narrator and Adama use the exact same wording for the device, bringing in new concepts and technology doesn't answer questions around the plot like Thurston thinks it does. Assuming the question being asked here is, why did the Cylons need to refuel from tankers to attack the humans if the humans can reach Caprica without refueling? Well, the obvious answer would be that the ships look very different, they have different capabilities. I don't think that anyone would have laboured over it any more than that. And certainly not more than the question that you've just introduced, namely, if the humans have a series of camouflaged and functioning fuel stations, why do they need to go to Cylon for fuel? From reading the book, well, the answer is that it's a different type of fuel on Cylon, required for faster-than-light travel. To be honest, this is either an author tying himself in knots to explain something that didn't need explaining, or the early drafts of this script were just overcomplicated. And the other strange part of it is that you'd go to that length to explain the tanker mystery and then expect me to buy into this miracle idea when you didn't need to introduce that either. Either way, short on supplies and fuel, the fleet splits in two, with the slower ships left in the cloaking field while the Battlestar and the faster ships go on ahead to Cylon, which is supposedly uninhabited but a known source of Tylium, the fuel they need to travel faster than light. To get there, they also need their three best pilots, Apollo, Starbuck and Boomer, to clear a path through a minefield in their fighters. Despite Thurston labouring on the capabilities of no less than 3 different types of mine, this is accomplished very rapidly, and the fleet is soon sending people to the planet, people to perform accelerated growth farming, again cut from the TV show, and others to explore and look for fuel. What they find instead is the Ovions, insectoid aliens who run a casino on the planet. Starbuck and Boomer explore that, while Apollo and the others are looking for the fuel. Along for the ride is Serina, former journalist and now love interest, and a child called Boxy, who she kidnapped during the attack on her home planet. As a minor finger in the eye for those resolutely determined to see themselves represented in everything, I was Boxy's age when I first saw this, and I always hated him. I found him a distraction, usually an annoying one, from the actual business, the job at hand. There was, or should be, an urgency to the circumstances of the book here, and the series, and he was always a break on that. He is here too, running off with his robot dog, which you'd think was way better programmed. Even an overriding stop and return command would have solved an awful lot of problems. Boxy will run off after the dog at least twice just during the events on Cylon. The first instance results in them being kidnapped by the Ovions, who then do release them into the casino and a reunion with Starbuck and Boomer. Adama's political rival Sayuri proposes all the humans visit Cylon. Adama resists, proposing staggered visits. On the planet, Apollo is also suspicious of the Ovions, while Yuri and the others propose not just visiting, but settling the planet, only after proving their peaceful intentions to the Cylons by disposing of all their weaponry. The idea that the Ovions are drugging their food to make them more susceptible to such suggestions was also dropped from the TV show, as is the exploration of the Ovions themselves, the relationship between the Keen and Ceatol, her infatuated aide. Yuri proposes a celebration honouring the 3 pilots for clearing the minefield and getting everyone happy before he proposes disarmament. What he doesn't know is that the Ovions are slaves to the Cylons, and the Cylons are on their way in force. During the celebration, Apollo, suspicious of men wearing his squadron's uniforms but unknown to him, follows them into the lower levels of the casino. There he discovers the Cylons in wait, and a shootout follows, but not before Boxy has run off again, luring Serina into danger. The Cylon attack interrupts Sayuri's plans, but Adama had sent imposters to the planet in pilot's uniform, and as such had crews ready for it. Regardless, as with the TV show, the Cylons are simply faceless cannon fodder. Boomer and Starbuck wiped out the entire contingent of guards at one doorway, and Yuri was the first to hightail it through to the outside. The rest of Red Squadron had produced weapons, and laser fire crisscrossed in all directions. Voices screamed, and lights, hit by random shots, began to sizzle and go out. The perfunctory nature of the way Boomer and Starbuck's massacre is related here might be due to aiming for a younger audience, and this final sentence where unknown voices are screaming but only random lights are killed supports that idea, as does the total absence of the word frack. But surely even kids deserve something livelier than this. The final sentence is especially dreadful, and not just because it seems to have served as inspiration for the dismal sci-fi of Chuck Wendig. As with the TV show, the dogfighting in space is the star, and Thurston is clearly trying a lot harder here. Apollo evaded the Cylon with a sweep left, a quarter turn and a spin to the right. Coming out of spin, he opened fire, cleaving his attacker across the middle. Both pieces started to go out of control and fall towards Cylon. Another Cylon fighter started tracking his wake and firing, and he put his Viper into a reverse loop, coming down on the Cylon from above and running a line of fire across the top of the entire craft. A sudden explosion, and the Cylon ship had been instantly transfigured to debris. That's certainly an interesting last sentence. But there's also a lot of sweeping, looping and spinning, which is always a good trick, of course. I don't know why, if you're trying so hard to write in short sentences, you'd let this one go through in this form, though. On the planet, as the rest of the pilots race back to their ships and into the fight, Starbuck steals a fuel tanker and takes that back. Not completely without incident, but again, the TV show jettisoned that idea, and Thurston barely writes about it. The pilots, outnumbered ridiculously, get the upper hand. Adama discovers that the half of the fleet they left behind is also under attack, and they retreat to successfully rescue them. After his victory, Yuri is contrite, Adama is celebrated as the fleet's ruler, and they all head off for Earth. Even though, as a child, I really liked the TV show, I think that the book is a worthy addition to it. One or two differences in the plot that are generally not for the better don't really detract from that, because the characters are just a little bit more fleshed out. Mostly for the better, though the opening could be tighter, much closer in fact to the TV show, but the rest of Thurston's book breathes quite nicely. It might only be by about 1%, but the colonies and the people that inhabit them are explored just a little bit more, and most of the changes are welcome and interesting. If you're introducing something like Starbuck flying the tanker in, it really should have been built up by much more. Show me how important it is that that tanker makes it, that is the fuel that they desperately need, and not just one small shipment of many. Show Apollo and the others fighting off the Cylons as they try to stop it getting home. The action generally, though, never really rises to the level it should, but the extra exploration of the Cylons and their leader is also very welcome. We see that the Cylons get extra brains, perhaps extra processing power as they rise in rank. That's an interesting concept, perhaps even an analogy for communism. This is a Cold War book, after all. But here we have only the leader or leaders given the freedom to think. And the Cylon leader does, musing on the similarities and differences between Cylons and humans. He detested the very concept of evil as much as he despised the concept of good. They were not opposites, and they were not mutually exclusive. Even most humans knew that. As he grows to hate the humans that avoid and defy him, he comes to recognize human traits in his third and highest mind, and he hates them all the more for that too. But it's great sci-fi inviting consideration of what makes us evil. Parallels are drawn. As Goulart is threatened with extermination, he tries to buy his life with information. When your Centurions were collecting and exterminating survivors, one of them gave me information. Oh, on what grounds? That I saved the man's life. Did you? Of course not. I beheaded him myself. Goulart is unaware as he says it that he will share the man's fate, not just begging to trade a life for information, but even the very manner of his execution. Then the Ovions are introduced, especially the Queen Lotte and her aide Cetol. Their insectoid civilization is again similar to the Cylons. The Cylon leader describes single-brained Cylons as nothing more than drones. The Ovions are subjugated Cylon slaves seeded on the planet to maintain the fuel supply. Insectoid informant society, yet the affection Thurston shows them sharing, though mostly repressed, is a glimpse of something human. And it comes at a time when the human survivors are also considering subjugating themselves to the Cylons. Do the Ovions represent a chilling image of a future degenerated man, forever enslaved as sub-Cylons like the Ovions? whose spirit is not quite crushed, their emotions not quite exterminated, yet enslaved, and with their individuality all but gone, collapsing into servitude and monstrous barbarism. The final irony, I guess, to that is that the Cylon Empire, as its leader willingly embraces human emotions, mostly hate, is equally doomed. In conclusion, the novelisation of Battlestar Galactica is a very accessible book. It is written so that even the most censorious librarian couldn't deny it to a youthful audience. Yet there's more to it than you might expect. It repeatedly compares the behaviour of the three races involved, which in turn asks consideration of its themes of humanity and difference, of family and of power. The Adama family dominates, and there are aspects of soap opera about their relationships, the budding relationship, the cheating lover, but there's enough daring do and sacrifice interspersed that things remain interesting and engaging, decent sci-fi, and easy to recommend. Thanks for watching. Like and hit subscribe for more like this.
My name is Riley, and I'm a student. The first 2 weeks at Sexington University were perfectly normal. I was drunk until the end of freshers when my student loan ran out. Then Professor Lovecraft exploded his lab and my eyebrows and everything changed. My roommate started dying. Aliens invaded. I killed a dragon over breakfast, got stranded in the past and attacked by dinosaurs. I might have committed a genocide. I might have robbed an empire. I may even have saved the world. I really hope next week is quieter. I have an assignment due.